The Silence of the Lambs is undoubtedly one of the most influential horror films of all time. Many viewers have an ingrained idea of what a horror film should be: blood and gore, jump scares, relentless terror. But this movie subverts those expectations and delivers something much more layered. It tells the thrilling story of Clarice Starling, an FBI trainee trudging through a world that forces her to run full speed against the winds of prejudice and scrutiny, just to be seen as competent, let alone taken seriously. How she is seen is actually one of the most striking aspects of the film, as eyes wander over her throughout the movie, and actors are constantly acting toward the camera lens when speaking with her, forcing us into Clarice's shoes. This movie is really all about eyes, where characters look, who watches whom, and why it matters. In other films, director Jonathan Demme has directed his actors to stare directly at the camera to deliver their lines. But in Silence of the Lambs, he takes this method to the extreme, because more than anything, he wants to pull you into the psychological space of the film. He wants viewers to care about the evolution of the characters just as much as the evolution of the plot. And one of the most effective ways to make the audience genuinely care about the protagonist, in addition to writing them with a compelling and human level of character depth, of course, is by putting us in their shoes. All of these scenes where characters are staring at the camera tell us not just to consider how important the dialogue is to the plot, but it also forces us to think, how does this make Clarice feel? Demme's use of actors staring into the camera isn't just a stylistic choice. The eyes in this movie elevate the story. The meaning behind them shifts depending on the scene. Sometimes it's about power and control, like when Lecter stares Clarice down. Other times it's about vulnerability, especially when she's under the scrutiny of men who clearly don't see her as an equal. And occasionally, like in her quieter moments with Ardelia, it becomes something gentler, a sign of mutual understanding. The significance of perception is very quickly established in this film. To aptly set the stage, the movie starts with Clarice running through an obstacle course before being stopped and told that the head of the behavioral science unit, Jack Crawford, would like to speak with her. As she walks away from her first encounter of the movie, something subtle but very important happens. The messenger keeps his eyes locked on her as she walks away. One could argue that there isn't much else to look at in these barren woods, but it gives us a subtle hint that something is likely afoot with the way that characters perceive Clarice. After a few shots of her walking through the academy, we get what is arguably the most important shot that sets the stage for what sort of challenges Clarice will face throughout the movie. She takes an elevator as the only woman, surrounded by men hulking over her, some of whom are glancing down at her. The statement this shot makes is clear. Clarice is operating in a male-dominated environment. The people around her see her as someone who must constantly prove herself, not just as a capable agent, but also as a woman navigating a space where she's often reduced to an object of desire. Some of the men's glances carry an unspoken judgment, mixing quiet doubt with subtle attraction. It's a world where competence alone isn't enough. Clarice has to navigate both professional expectations and the complicated reality of being seen through multiple, sometimes conflicting lenses. This sets the stage for her meeting with Jack Crawford, which in turn sets the tone for the entire movie. The camera places us directly in his gaze, grounding us in Clarice's perspective and inviting us to feel the encounter as she does. He playfully recalls how Clarice once grilled him at a seminar, reluctantly admitting that he gave her an A, only for Clarice to correct him with,
A-, sir.
His statement, and more importantly, the gaze that follows, reveal everything we need to know about his feelings toward her. He recognizes her intellect, but doesn't fully respect her. Understanding their dynamic is crucial since she wants to work in Crawford's unit after she graduates. That means she has to play along, smiling through backhanded compliments, enduring subtle power plays, and staying in his good graces even when he undermines her in less obvious ways. Jack assigns her the task of analyzing the infamous serial killer and former psychiatrist Hannibal Lecter, but clarifies that he doesn't expect Lecter to cooperate with her. It should also be mentioned that at this time, Clarice isn't aware of Crawford's hidden agenda. He's actually trying to get information from Lecter that will help them in their search for the serial killer Buffalo Bill. The scene ends with him planting an important seed while gazing at the camera once again.
Believe me, you don't want Hannibal Lecter inside your head. Just do your job, but never forget what he is.
He stares at us with this line, so we share Clarice's intimidation. Jumping into her first of 4 encounters with Lecter, arguably one of the most iconic scenes in all of cinema, the many eyes staring at both us and Clarice have already told us more about her than any line of dialogue. Her biggest obstacles in the movie are simply doubt and judgment, both of which continue to be felt with many gazes that follow. Clarice, now at the asylum holding Lecter, First has to humor the asylum director Dr. Chilton as he attempts to flirt with her. His eyes on us, followed by the eyes of the other patients as she walks up to Lecter's cell, show that the judgment she faces isn't going anywhere. As the stares and the remarks that come with them grow more invasive and demeaning, the viewer is led to believe that her encounter with Lecter will likely be the most belligerent of them all. That Lecter's gaze will carry more contempt and perversion than any gaze she's felt thus far, but then this happens. He simply gazes. He's quiet, composed, and unflinching, giving us the impression that perhaps he's unlike any character we've been introduced to, and he delivers his first line.
Good morning.
He gives us the impression that he's much more willing to give Clarice the benefit of the doubt, softening the tension that was just built up by the previous gazes, but still, his eyes are piercing and unsettling. Given the exposition provided, we know that he's a psychiatrist and that he's known for getting into people's heads, so this gaze tells us loudly that he is analyzing her. He's doing to her the very thing she was sent to do to him, to get a read on the other person, and that's what makes this scene so brilliant. The tables have turned, and now the POV is the one being scrutinized. The camera cuts back and forth between them, both staring directly into the lens as they speak, highlighting the duality of their intentions. At the same time, this technique puts us in Clarice's shoes as she's being examined. We share her sense of intrusion, the feeling that her privacy is being invaded, and the tension that comes with having insecurities poked at. But Lecter's gaze isn't just a reflection of his analysis, it's also a tool he uses for power. He knows she's uncomfortable during their first encounter, and the more he stares her down, the more insecure she feels, allowing him to control the narrative of this conversation as he stares her down and peels back her entire identity. At the same time, his unflinching demeanor makes it impossible for Clarice to get a read on him, and it works. His eyes dominate Clarice. She fails to gain leverage over him and leaves emotionally scarred, instead being sent on a wild goose chase. Several events happen before their second encounter, one of them being that Clarice is notified that Lecter convinced his asylum neighbor Miggs to swallow his tongue, likely for the disrespect he showed Clarice on her way out. This is an important piece of context because it gives Clarice, and us, the impression that Lecter may have taken an interest in her, not emotionally, but intellectually. Perhaps he sees potential in her, and perhaps this side of him can be leveraged. This could be perceived as weak on his part, but it's all part of Lecter's plan. With how disturbing their first encounter was, some viewers might believe that the next one will be even more intense, but no. Instead, Clarice finds that the lights are off at the asylum, and Lecter chooses to sit in the dark where she can't see his face. The key word there is that he chooses to sit there. Rather than sitting in the light where she can see him, he acknowledges the fact that his gaze is what kept her feeling so feeble during their last encounter. So he sits where she can comfortably speak with him, because now he has an underlying motive that he'll soon reveal, and he can't fulfill it unless they cooperate with one another. Pair this with the small gesture of giving her a towel, and now Lecter sits in her good graces. He sits in the dark, still occasionally making discomforting remarks to establish dominance, but hearing his judgment and feeling it are two different things. When the lights go back on, Lecter jumps right into bargaining with her, facing away from her while describing his request so that Clarice doesn't feel the tension of his gaze while picturing the things that Lecter is asking, as that would likely leave her with a negative recollection of his request. He then turns around and gazes as a power play when offering what she wants.
I'll help you catch him, Clarice.
He says, following with a statement that Buffalo Bill is already chasing his next victim. The pressure is on with his gaze amplifying it, and Clarice once again plays right into his hand. Their next encounter begins with her striking a deal with him, an offer to have him transferred to a better facility and periodic outdoor access. He plays ball, but he demands information about Clarice in exchange. With how personal the information he's squeezing out of her is, he knows that she won't keep the stream of information coming if she feels like she's being scrutinized. So what does he do? He immediately looks in the opposite direction. This is a major shift from how much he was staring her down in their first encounter, and given the position he's sitting in, this is a very unnatural way to engage with her. But he makes the choice to look away so that she will remain comfortable enough to keep a steady stream of thought and spill sensitive details about her worst childhood memory, one that she's depicted visualizing in an earlier scene as she gazes at the camera walking down a funeral aisle. The camera is solely glued to Clarice's eyes now, conveying the message that it's time to step out of her POV and time to start listening to her. The conversation shifts back over to the Buffalo Bill case, and his position while speaking to her becomes more natural, but of course, once he asks her another personal question, he begrudgingly looks away again. During this encounter, he adds the remark,
I think it would be quite something to know you in private life.
This is a very important detail because now Lecter's feelings toward Clarice are starting to become clear. Their fourth and final encounter, now taking place at a holding cell in Memphis, is the one that ties everything together. Not just their dynamic, but more importantly, the movie's recurring theme of eyes and perception, giving much more weight to the fact that the camera is constantly allowing us to see through the eyes of the characters. Lecter gazes at her, clarifying that she already has everything she needs to find Buffalo Bill in her case files, and proceeds to ask her the rhetorical question of why Buffalo Bill does what he does, leading to the rant that unveils everything.
He covets. How do we begin to covet, Clarice? We begin by coveting what we see every day. Don't you feel eyes moving over your body, Clarice? And don't your eyes seek out the things you want?
We'll dig into how this aptly describes Buffalo Bill in a moment, but this speaks volumes about how the film frames desire, perception, and power. It's a reminder that looking isn't passive, it's charged. Their eyes in this movie don't just observe, they project, dominate, and dissect. Lecter understands this better than anyone. He's been using it to his advantage from the beginning. That's what makes his gaze so distinct. Every glance in Silence of the Lambs has a function, sometimes to intimidate, sometimes to assess, sometimes to assert control. But Lecter's gaze evolves. At first, it's invasive, calculated, designed to throw Clarice off balance. But gradually, as he learns more about her, it becomes something else entirely. A way of understanding, which is the very thing that she struggles to find. Now when he stares, it hits differently. It's not about attraction, and it's not just about dominance anymore. It's about interest, real interest in who she is and how she thinks and what drives her. That's the thing no one else in the movie gives her. Everyone else underestimates her or objectifies her. Lecter is the only one actually paying attention. And sure, that doesn't make him less terrifying, but it does make his gaze feel more earned. Like he's not just looking at her, he is seeing her. And what he sees fascinates him. He's infatuated with her, but again, not on an emotional level, an intellectual one. There's so much irony in the fact that the person who stared her down the most was doing so through a completely different lens. He was reading her, figuring her out, not with lust, but with curiosity, because he saw something deeper, something his eyes alone couldn't give him. It's twisted, but kind of perfect. The one person we expected to have the most sick and distorted perception of her actually understood her better than anyone. The conversation is cut short and he never gives her Bill's real name. Whether he actually knows it or not, he's always been playing games with her, but that's exactly the point. He wants inside her head, and helping her with the case was his way in. Now left with nothing but the case files and Lecter's words that echo in her head, she needs to put everything together to find Buffalo Bill. And she succeeds. She finds him and follows him down into his basement, but Bill kills the power, flipping the movie's central theme on its head. Now, Clarice can't see anything in the pitch black basement. Instead of the camera swaying back and forth in the same manner as Clarice, it remains still, with Buffalo Bill's gaze pointing at us, reflecting that she doesn't see him, but she feels him watching. And we feel it too. He watches her for a long moment, holding her at gunpoint, relishing in the shallow thrill of coveting what he desires, an obsession that would ultimately be his downfall. When he finally cocks the hammer, Clarice hears him, quickly turns around, and takes him out. Buffalo Bill's nature, the very thing that fueled his crimes and ambitions, is what leads to his defeat. He coveted transformation and identity, trying to become something else by taking from others. He coveted the skin and life of those he envied, and in doing all of this, he became addicted to coveting. This endless craving that he chased with his eyes became his weakness, and it killed him. Conversely, Clarice figuratively turns the tables on the very thing that loomed over her throughout the movie. In this final showdown, Buffalo Bill's gaze doesn't just represent his coveting, but also the judgment and doubt of everyone she's encountered thus far. This night vision view of her represents how seemingly everyone in her life has viewed her, helpless and weak. In beating him, Clarice proves that those shallow perceptions weren't a reflection of her, they were a projection. She's not feeble or insufficient, she's very capable and always was, hence her hard-fought but well-earned victory. Throughout the movie, the many wandering eyes don't just shape Clarice's story, they shape how we experience it. By forcing us to feel these gazes through the camera, the film conveys things about the characters that couldn't be said through traditional angles alone. Beyond just creating an unsettling atmosphere, these stares pull us into Clarice's world, letting us feel the judgment and power plays that she endures. The eyes aren't just watching her, they're pulling us into her story.
You see a lot, Doctor?
So I don't normally do video essays. Normally on this channel, I just do spoiler-free movie reviews, but I want to branch out, try different types of content, and video essays are something I've been thinking more about. If you liked this video essay, consider giving it a like. It really does help the channel grow. And if you have any thoughts on it or any criticisms, I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. I will see you later this week with a review of Fantastic Four.